Let us begin, Be'ez Hashem. We're holding in the middle of the sugya of Netilas Yodayim. We started yesterday the Gavaldiga sugya. We spoke about a little bit about the chashivas of Netilas Yodayim and how choshev it is al pi sifrei Chasidus that we mentioned yesterday. Mama, some of the secrets of the world are contained within Netilas Yodayim. It's very, very choshev halachas. We're not going to go over how choshev the halachas are and how careful a person has to be. Let me just mention one more time something mentioned twice already yesterday, and that is from the Heilige Shulchan HaTorah in the Minhag Kamarna, that it says if a person would know the tsar and the oynish of a person who eats without Netilas Yodayim done in the correct way, would never eat bread without being a bucky in the halachas of Netilas Yodayim. As I pass in the Heilige Minhag Kamarna in the Shulchan HaTorah, if you would know the tsar and the oynish from a person not doing it in the correct way, Shemi Rachem, you wouldn't eat. It reminds me of the Maisa that the Lubliner Rav would, right before he made Kiddush on Friday night. So before he made Kiddush, what did he do? His Shabbos is coming in. Shabbos is starting after the Hilchah Shabbos, have to know what to do. So he chazed the ganze Hilchah Shabbos before he made Kiddush, to make sure that he knew what to do before Kiddush. So before you wash the Netilas Yodayim, before you eat bread, we have to know the halachas. So that's what we started yesterday, okay? Yesterday we started the inyanim of how much water, how many times, until where, and these sorts of things. I want to go to some other halachas as well, Be'ez Hashem, and then we'll see tomorrow. We'll try to finish off the halachas. Again, remember, these halachas are huge. These halachas are huge. We can spend weeks and weeks. You go through Shulchan Aruch, simonim after simonim after simonim. It's unbelievable on Hilchos Netilas Yodayim. So I just want to give you some pointers like this. Number one, when do we make the bracha on Netilas Yodayim? Very interesting, because we know a klal in the Gemara in Erevin, and we pass this many places. Bracha has to be made over lasiyason. Over lasiyason means what? Right before you do the mitzvah. Before you do the mitzvah, you then make the bracha. For example, before you tighten the tefillin shal yad on your hand, it's a mistake that a lot of people make, right? Is as they're putting up, they're making the bracha. As they're putting it on their head, the shalosh, they're making the bracha. It's a big mistake. It's partially a big mistake. It could be you have to make a new bracha. It could be the bracha wasn't chal. It has to be once the tefillin shal yad is on the place, right before you tighten it, you make the bracha, boom, then you tighten it, because that's the mitzvah. Same thing over here. Be'etzem should be, when do you make the bracha al Netilas Yodayim? Before you wash your hands. Because the mitzvah of Netilas Yodayim is to wash your hands. So if the mitzvah is to wash your hands, you should be making a bracha and then washing your hands. Does anybody do that? No. What happened? That's weird. Where do we ever find such a thing that you don't make the bracha before doing the mitzvah? When the mitzvah, chelik of the mitzvah is drying. It's a chelik, it's a hemshuk of the mitzvah, maskim. The mitzvah, it says al Netilas Yodayim, not niguv Yodayim.
Whenever you can't talk after the bracha, like what's new?
Talking is okay. If it's done at tzoyrech, it's okay. There's no. You mean the reason why we don't make a bracha is because you're worried about a hefsek?
Why do we do it by Shabbos?
What do you mean by Hilchah Shabbos? Right. Over lasiyason.
We do it before. You don't want to make a hefsek.
What do you mean? The woman makes a bracha before. She doesn't want to have a nos, so she covers her eyes, but she makes it before. Avada. Who? Bracha achroina. That's afterwards. That's I'm thanking Hashem for after eating, I think. But a mitzvah, a bracha on a mitzvah is hadlok is ner Chanukah. You know, everything that we do is always before. What happened over here? So it's interesting, very interesting. The Shulchan Aruch brings this, by the way, in Kufna Ches Sif Yud Aleph. Mevorich koydem netila. See that? Shulchan Aruch mefurish. Mevorich koydem netila. How does the art scroll translate that? Before. That's pretty easy. Preceding art scroll. Shekol ha-mitzvahs mevarich aleim over lasiyason. That's what we do. Shulchan Aruch says. Right? The Olam here follows the Shulchan Aruch. We follow the Shulchan Aruch over here. Toli, we follow Shulchan Aruch over here. Zev, what are you tying now? Nochi. Well, we follow Shulchan Aruch or not? We follow Shulchan Aruch over here. If the Shulchan Aruch says you make a bracha before, we make a bracha before. Continues the Shulchan Aruch. Aber v'nogu sheloi levorech ad acha netila. Why not? What happened? Why do we make the bracha after Ruvain? Mishum de pa'omim she'ein yodov nikiyos. Your hands are not clean, and you got to make a bracha with your hands clean, right? You ever saw rebbes or tzaddikim before they do anything? They always wash their hands. You ever saw a rebbe walk in to be sandik by a bris? They'll wash their hands before anything. They always wash their hands before you do a mitzvah. You wash your hands. What's shif sheif yodov? Rub your hands. The Olam does this when you wash the Netilas Yodayim? No. Huh? Basics. Right. You ever saw people do this? People, We know that you do it, Yitzi. But I said, did you see the Oilam do this, right? I remember asking once for a Falk Zatzal about another halacha, which, by the way, we should discuss. Before you eat pickles, you have to do Netilas Yodayim. This everyone knows. This everyone knows. Who doesn't know? Anyone who didn't? Lipi didn't grow up this way. Avada, but we eat a pickle. You wash the Netilas Yodayim, right? So I remember discussing with Falk. I said, Rebbe, nobody does this. He says to me, excuse me, I do it every single time. Anyway, the point is that there's another halacha that when you wash your hands, you have to do shif. You ever saw people do it? You wash Netilas Yodayim, and then they do this. Tuli, you saw this? They do this, right? Why they do this? Not only in the Rebbes, Shulchan Aruch, as I steht mit Virisch. The Heilige Tzvasaruf. The Tzvasaruf gesucht. Okay, fine. It's against the Shulchan Aruch. No, you want to do shif, okay? So you got to do shif. And that's another reason as well, because the shif is a chelik, and the drying is also a chelik as well, which is also like Yitzi said as well. The drying of your hands is a chelik of the mitzvah as well, which is why we'll see halacha in a moment. Now, when do you make the bracha? Do you make it before shif or do you make it after shif? In other words, you wash your hands, you need to do shif. You need to just like rub it over to get rid of all the dirt. So when do you make the bracha? Before that or after that? So it's interesting. It seems to be a little bit of machlokes. The Chayei Adam brings down that you make the bracha after shif, but before drying your hands. So you wash, shif, bracha, drying. The Shulchan Aruch Harav in Siddur, in Netilas Yodayim, he brings down first you make the bracha, and that's wash, bracha, shif, drying. Don't you know with me over here? Okay. Rabbi says very important. This is the Heilige Baal Shem Tov came to Eretz Yisrael just to learn these Yisodos from the Heilige Oruch Chaim HaKudosh. So we have to know these. What's that? There's different minhagim. Whichever one you do is okay. Mishnah brings down the first one, Agav. Now, what happens if a person didn't make the bracha and he dried his hands? He washed, dried, he forgot to make the bracha. So Avada, he can still make the bracha, says the Mishnah Berurah, all the way until he actually does Hamotzi. Once said Hamotzi, obviously it's going to be too late in that case. Now this is a very important thing. The drying of your hands is a chelik of the mitzvah. Right? The Gemara in Saita says very clearly, you all learn this, second Seder. The Gemara says that if you eat bread with wet hands, right, so by the trip, we mentioned this by the trip, guys are washing their hands and touching the bread. You've got to be careful, you've got to wipe your hand. We'll talk about that in a minute. What's the Gemara saying Saita about a person that does that? You're eating lechem tomei. Who wants to eat lechem tomei? Nobody wants to eat lechem tomei. So therefore you've got to make sure your hands are dry when you touch and handle the bread. Why? What's pshat? Anybody knows the reason why? Why can't I have wet hands when I touch the bread?
Just the water that was on your hand.
What do you mean the water? I mean the water that's Tomei was on my hands is now going on to the bread and Tomei the bread and made what's going on. So it's interesting what you're saying. The Beis Yosef brings down as our reason, and he says down it's interesting because we wash twice. Yeah. And the second time we wash is why? To get rid of the Tomei water. The whole reason we wash the second time is so that the water that's on our hand that's Tomei is off. So I no longer have Tomei water on me. Of our PK, the Beis Yosef said you still have to make sure it's dry because you've got to get off that water that was matar.
Why don't we rub in between?
No, rub is to get rid of the dirt. Drying is to get rid of the Tomei water that you have on your hands. There's another reason the Marshal, the Yom Shlomo brings down, and that is that hands that are wet due to Netilas Mos. Right? Rashi brings it in Saita. Rashi brings it. It's Mos. It's disgusting. Rashi says it's disgusting. It's not nice. Okay? We learn Rashi, right?
Here.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, that's how you don't want to.
Bye bye.
Rabbi, you don't have anything to dry your hands.
Oh, okay, interesting question. What if you don't have anything to dry your hands on? So, okay, a couple of halachas about drying, Rabbi Say. Zev, are you with me? Yeah. Very important. How to dry your hands. So if drying is a chelik of the mitzvah, so it's a chelik of the mitzvah, it has to be done. If it has to be done, the shaila is, can I use a yitzi? Can you use an electric thing, right? Whether in the olden days you used to go like that, nowadays you stick your hands in. Are you allowed to use those things or not in order to dry your hands? Or does it have to be a pu'ula of drying by taking a towel and drying your hands? Zevi, what are you, Taina?
Getting rid of the water, look here.
Why not?
So the poskim Taina, that if you were washing with a small amount of water, that the water on your hand is actually tomei, then you need to do a pu'ula of taking the actual water off by using a towel or something similar. right? Because it's a chelik of the mitzvah, a pu'ula has to be done. Simply holding it in front of a hot air is not a pu'ula, it's not good enough. Oh, but nowadays, it could be so back to me, that nowadays, it's not done that way, because the water we're using, number one, is more than the reviers, number two, we wash twice, and therefore, the water on the hands is not tamei. If that's the case, then avada, it's okay to use one of these hot air things in order to dry hands. That is not a problem. What about using a wet towel to wipe your hands, right? This is the minig in many yeshivas, and this is the minig HaKodesh in many shtibluch. No, it's done. It's mamish. I saw my Kadosh bring it down. It's very big zach. It's very big zach. There should be a wet towel by the shtibel, by shalashidas. Geschmack. Shailav schita on Shabbos. If you're over on schita, forget baby wipes. This is wording in shalashidas. What? Sponsorships available for paper towels for the rest of the year. Anyway, so lemaisa like this. Rav Vosna has a tshuva in Shevet HaLevi in Chelik Zayin Siman Chof Aleph, and he brings down that he says that be'etzem, if the towel is toifeach amanas latfiach, toifeach amanas latfiach means that if I would with one finger touch it, it gets wet enough that it will wet another finger. Okay, toifeach amanas latfiach. So me'ika hadin, really a person should not dry his hands on such a thing. So it's a problem. He says nowadays where we wash anyway with more than a reviers, so therefore the water on the towel is not tomei water. If it's not tomei water, there's absolutely no problem whatsoever in that case over there, and that is fine. By the way, washing on, drying on your own clothing, Hashem Yerachim. Washing on someone else's, drying on somebody else's clothing is a first Gemara that you're a ganaf, but that's besides the point. That's how they found out that someone was a ganaf, right? Famous Meiser. But if, on your own clothing, to go and wipe on your own clothing, people do this all the time. They, wipe on their own clothing. Shem Yerachim. The Magen Avraham brings a tashbeitz, where the tashbeitz is brought down halacha mishmur kuf nun chesikot memhei. The halacha lemaisa that if a person does that, it's kosher l'shichcha. If you wonder why you forgot yesterday's Gemara or yesterday's halacha, whatever it may be, you're like, oh no, what's pshat? Shimon, you with me? Then it's because the Magen Avraham brings the tashbeitz that you forgot your learning because you wiped it. Yitzi. Yeah? Can you repeat that? Okay? And therefore you cannot do it on yours or anybody else's. You have to just... What can you do? You just have to just keep on going. No, it doesn't make a difference. And especially if he's wearing it, it's kosher l'shichcha. You can't do that. If someone's wearing it. It's like sewing. You should never sew. We're not going to go through this now. But sewing while something is on you. Right? If you want to sew a button while something's on you, also kosher l'shichcha. The end of the bread. If you have something in your mouth, yeah. A zip up?
I'm not wearing it.
It's around you, what do you mean? That's called wearing it. Oh, if you're not wearing it, then fine. What about it? Also, many of these things. We're going to go through things. Rabbi Yisrael, let's move on. Next. Let's move on. Next. You need koyach gavra. Koyach gavra, by the way, means that each washing you do has to be koyach gavra. So if you open up the faucet, and yes, it came originally through your maisa, through your energy, but at the end of the day, that's the first washing. You have to close it and reopen it for the second time, because each one needs to be a koyach gavra. Using a plastic cup for Netilas Yodayim. So we know it not only does it need koyach gavra, also needs a din of a keli, a clear utensil. A utensil by definition is not a plastic cup that you're going to be throwing out in 2 seconds, because that's not got a din of a kli. A lot of poskim are makel, especially if you're keeping it for the next guy also to wash. So it's content, you machshav it as a kli, you're using it as that, or especially if there's no option, then obviously you can be maker, there's nothing else to use, then of course use that. But lechatchila, of course it's better to have a kois, to have a kli, a cup, a real thing that you're keeping. But again, if you're stuck, you can use a plastic cup, but you should try to keep it for the next guy, then it makes it more choshev. Washing in the toilet, very negeya, for example, in the aeroplane or other places as well, that lechatchila you cannot wash Netilas Yodayim in the toilet, right? It's a mokum of tumah, but etzem you need Netilas Yodayim after you come out the toilet. So how can you wash in the toilet? But however, b'shas atchak godel zuk the minchas Yitzchak in chelik aleph siman samach chelkas Yaakov also b'shas atchak godel you can be mekel and wash Netilas Yodayim in the toilet, but don't dry your hands. You come out the bathroom. When you come out, you should come out with wet hands. Meaning, when you wash your hands, don't dry them in the bathroom. Come out with wet hands. But then you've got to be careful that there shouldn't be a 12-second break between the actual washing and the bracha, which we'll talk about maybe a different time because you have a hefsek between one and the other. You've got issues. What's that? Ashiyotza is no shaykhs to this. We're not talking about ashiyotza. That's a different shaykhs. If you go to the bathroom and wash Netilas Yodayim, then you have a problem. But we're not going to talk about that right now because that could be a hefsek one into the other by making ashiyotza before making Netilas Yodayim. Our bathrooms, it depends. Some of I'll speak to Shmuel about that. About our bathrooms are different nowadays than the days of Chazal. It depends where you are. I don't know. Maybe yeah, maybe no. I'm not sure. I don't want to say. Rav Chaim Bektake held they were. Rav Chaim Magen Avraham Betzim brings it. Huh? Okay, fine. Let's move on, Rabbi Isai. Rabbi Isai, one last halacha for today. If you're stuck with that water, there seems to be a thing that if there's no water, so if you wrap the bread in a plastic, then I don't need to wash. That's kavaldik, right? There's no shaykhs to benching, by the way. That doesn't, just because you didn't wash, right? The Gemara says in Yuma, you eat one garlic doesn't mean you can eat another garlic, right? Just because you didn't wash doesn't mean, I don't have to bench. Chas v'shulam. Just because you didn't wash doesn't mean you don't have to bench. Of course you have to bench. No shaykhs, but there's no halacha that I found anywhere. Maybe I challenge you. I'll give you a lot of money if you find right now a Shulchan Aruch, anywhere in Dalil Chelke Shulchan Aruch that it says that if you don't want to wash, you just cover the bread in some plastic or some towel or some aluminum foil, and you don't have to wash. Nishtar zazach, it doesn't exist. What? So one second. So what does exist? Where does it come from? Where it comes from is the Shulchan Aruch brings it. And if you look in Kuf Samach Gimel in the beginning, Shulchan Aruch brings that if a person is on the derech and he's stuck without water, by the way, there's enough kamina how far you have to go depending on where you are. For example, if you're on the derech, then you have to go 4 mil. That's 72 minutes. If you are in your house, that's 1 mil. That's 18 minutes. That means if you can find water within 18 minutes, then there's absolutely no heta. If you can find it within 72 minutes, there's also no heta. It's only in a situation where longer than 72 minutes, I'm on the journey, I'm traveling, and longer than 72 minutes it's going to take me to get water, then maybe there is a heta. And like the Mishnah Berurah points out clearly, it's talking about a situation where you wrap your hands, not the bread. The bread don't have to be wrapped. Both of your hands have to be wrapped so that you won't come to touch it and be metam in the bread. V'chole v'chole. The Be'alacha brings over here in Kufn Gimel. He brings a Chaya Odom. Right? It comes from Rishonim. If you go to the Ritva, if you go to the Meiri and the Sugya, we're not going through it now. But the Be'alacha brings, it says only if you're very, very, very hungry, not stum. If you're stuck and you're starving and there's no other heta and there's no water for 72 minutes, so then maybe there's heta. Shulchan Aruch Balatanya, very, very macham in the whole sugya, which we're not going into now, but it's important to know that that is a halacha over there. Tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, many more points and halachas that we'll get into over the Netilas Yodayim. Have a wonderful day.